Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 138th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Nuzhat al-Zaman related to her husband the sad case of the widow of her brother al-Muluk, the chamberlain said, Entreat her honorably, and enrich her poverty. Thus, far concerning Nuzhat al-Zaman and her consort, and the relative of al-Muluk, but as regards Khan Makan and his cousin Kuzia Fakan, they grew up and flourished till they waxed like unto two fruit-laden boughs or two shining moons, and they reached the age of 15. And she was indeed the fairest of maids who are modestly veiled, lovely faced, with smooth cheeks graced, and slender waist on heavy hips based. And her shape was the shaft's thin line, and her lips were sweeter than old wine, and the nectar of her mouth as it were the fountain's salsabel, even as saith the poet in these two couplets describing one like her. As though pristine of wine on her lips honey dew dropped from the ripened grapes, her mouth in clusters grew, and when her frame, though doublest, and low bends her vine, praise her Creator's might, no creature ever knew. Of a truth, Allah had united in her every charm. Her shape would shame the branch of waving tree, and the rose before her cheeks craved lenity, and the honey dew of her lips of wine made cheer, however old and clear. And she gladdened heart, and beholder with joyous cheer, even as saith of her the poet. Goodly of gifts is she, and charm those perfect eyes, with lashes shaming kohl, and all the fair ones cold. And from those eyne the glances pierced the lover's heart, like sword, and al-Munani's Ali's hold. And the relator continued, as for Khan Makan, he became unique in loveliness, and excelling in perfection no less. None could even him in qualities as in seemliness, and the sheen of valor between his eyes was espied, testifying for him, while against him it never testified. The hardest hearts inclined to his side. His eyelids bore lashes black as by coal, and he was of surpassing worth in body and soul. And when the down of lips and cheeks began to sprout, bards and poets sang for him far and near. Appeared not my excuse till hair hath clothed his cheek, and gloom, or except that side-face sight to stagger. A fawn with eyes would batten on his charms. Each glance deals thrusts like point of conjured dagger. And saith another, His lover's souls have drawn upon his cheek an ant that perfected its rosy light. I marvel at such martyrs laissez pent, who yet with greenery robes of heaven are dight. Now it chanced one holiday that Kuzia Fakan fared forth to make festival in certain kindred of the court, and she went surrounded by her handmaids. And indeed beauty encompassed her. The roses of her cheeks doth envy to their mole. From out her smiling lips leven flashed white, gleaming like the chamomile. And Kanmakan began to turn about her and devour her with his sight, for she was the moon of resplendent light. Then he took heart, and giving his tongue a start, began to improvise. When shall the disappointed heart be healed of severance, and lips of union smile at ceasing of our hard mischance? Would heaven I knew shall come some night, and with it surely bring meeting with friend who, like myself, endureth sufferance. When Kuzia Fakan heard these couplets, she showed vexation and disapproval, and putting on a haughty and angry air, said to him, Dost thou name me in thy verse to shame me amongst folk? By Allah, if thou turn not from this talk, I will assuredly complain to thee the Grand Chamberlain, Sultan of Khorasan and Baghdad, and Lord of Justice and Equity, that disgrace of punishment may befall thee. Khan Makan made no reply for anger, but he returned to Baghdad, and Kuzia Fakan also returned to her palace, and complained of her cousin to her mother, who said to her, O my daughter, happily he meant thee no harm, and is he aught but an orphan? Withal he said naught of reproach to thee, so beware thou tell none of this, lest perchance it come to the Sultan's ears, and he cut short his life and blot out his name and make it even as yesterday, whose memory hath passed away. However, Khan Makan's love for Kuzia Fakan spread abroad in Baghdad, so that women talked of it. Moreover, his breast became straitened, and his patience waned, and he knew not what to do, yet he could not hide his condition from the world. Then longed he to give vent to the pangs he endured by reason of of separation, but he feared her rebuke and her wrath, so he began improvising. Now is my dread to incur reproaches, which disturb her temper and mind obscure. Patient, I'll bear them. In his generous youth beareth the burn of brand his case to cure. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 139th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Grand Chamberlain became Sultan, they named him King Sassane, and after he had assumed the throne, he governed the people in a righteous way. Now, as he was giving audience one day, Khan Makan's verses came to his knowledge. Thereupon he repented him of the past, and going into his wife Nuzhat al-Zaman, said to her, Verily to join hafla grass and fire is the greatest of risk, and man may not be trusted with woman, so long as eye glances and eyelid quivereth. Now thy brother's son, Khan Makan, is come to man's estate, and it behoveth us to forbid him access to the rooms where anklets trinkle, and it is yet more needful to forbid thy daughter the company of men, for the like of her should be kept in the harem. Replied she, Thou sayest sooth, O wise king. Next day came Khan Makan, according to his wont, and going in to his aunt saluted her. She returned his salutation and said to him, O my son, I have somewhat to say to thee, which I would fain leave unsaid, yet I must tell it thee despite my inclination. Quoth he, Speak. And quoth she, Know that thy sire, the chamberlain, the father of Kuzia Fakan, hath heard of the verses thou madest anent her, and hath ordered that she be kept in the harem and out of thy reach. If therefore, O my son, thou want anything from us, I will send it to thee from behind the door, and thou shalt not look upon Kuzia Fakan, nor shalt thou return hither from this day forth. When he heard this, he arose and withdrew without speaking a single word, and betaking himself to his mother, related what his aunt had said. She observed, This all cometh of thine over-talking. Thou knowest that the news of thy passion of Kuzia Fakan is noised abroad, and the tattle hath spread everywhere, how thou eatest their food, and thereafter thou courtest their daughter. Rejoined he, And who should have her but I? She is the daughter of my father's brother, and I have the best of rights to her. Retorted his mother, These are idle words. Be silent, lest haply they talk came to King Sasan's ears, and it proved the cause of thy losing her, and the reason of thy ruin and increase of thine affliction. They have not sent us any supper tonight, and we shall die an-hungered. And were we in any land but this, we were already dead of famine, or of shame for begging our bread. When Khan Makan heard these words from his mother, his regret redoubled. His eyes ran over with tears, and he complained and began improvising. Minish this blame I ever blame from you. My heart loves her to whom all love is due. Ask not from me of patience jot or tittle. Divorce of patience by God's house I rue. What blamers preach of patience I unheed. Here am I, love path firmly to pursue. Indeed, they bar me access to my love. Here am I, by God's ruth no ill I sue. Good sooth my bones, when as they hear thy name, quail as birds quailed when Nissus o'er them flew. Ah, said to them, who blame my love, that I will face that fair, fair cousin till I die. And when he had ended his verses, he said to his mother, I have no longer a place in my aunt's house, nor among these people, but I will go forth from the palace and abide in the corners of the city. So he and his mother left the court, and having sought an abode in the neighborhood of the poorest sort, there settled. But she used to go from time to time to King Sasan's palace, and thence take daily bread for herself and her son. As this went on, Kuzia Fakan took her aside one day and said to her, "Alas, O my Nanti, how is it with thy son?" Replied she, "O my daughter, sooth to say, he is tearful-eyed and heavy-hearted, being fallen into the net of thy love." And she repeated to her the couplets he had made, whereupon Kuzia Fakan wept and said, "By Allah, I rebuked him not for his words, nor for ill will to him, but because I feared for him the malice of foes. Indeed, my passion for him is double that he feeleth for me. My tongue may not describe my yearning for him, and were it not for the extravagant wilfulness of his words and the wanderings of his wit, my father had not cut off from him favors that beset, nor had decreed unto him exclusion and prohibition as fit. However, man's days bring naught but change, and patience in all case is most becoming. He who ordained our severance will vouchsafe us reunion." And she began versifying in these two couplets: "O son of mine uncle, same sorrow I bear, and suffer the like of thy cark and thy care. Yet hide I from man what I suffer for pine, hide it too, and such secret to man never bear." When his mother heard this from her, she thanked her and blessed her. Then she left her and acquainted her son with what she had said, whereupon his desire for her increased, and he took heart, being eased of his despair and the turmoil of his love and care. And he said, "By Allah, I desire none but her." And he began improvising: "Leave this blame, I will list to no flout of my foe. I divulged a secret was told me to keep. He is lost to my sight for those union I earn, and I watch all the while he can slumber and sleep." So the days and nights went by, whilst Khan Makan lay tossing upon coals of fire, till he reached the age of 17, and his beauty had waxed perfect, and his wits were at their brightest. One night, as he lay awake, he communed with himself and said, "Why should I keep silence till I waste away and see not my lover? Fault have I none save poverty. So by Allah, I am resolved to remove me from this region and wander over the wild and the wold, for my position in this city is a torture, and I have no friend nor lover therein to comfort me. Wherefore I am determined to distract myself by absence from my native land till I die, and take my rest after this shame and tribulation." And he began to improvise, and recited these couplets: "Albeit my vitals quiver near this ban, before the foe myself I'll ne'er unman. So pardon me, my vitals are at a writ, whose subscription are my tears that ran. Hey ho, my cousin seemeth Horimah, come down to earth by reason of Rizwan. Scapes not the dreadful sword lunge of her look, who dares the glancing of those eyne to scan. O'er Allah's widespread world I'll roam, and from such exile win what bread I can. Yes, o'er broad earth I'll roam and save my soul, all but her absence bearing like a man. With gladsome heart I'll haunt the field of fight, and meet the bravest brave in battle van." So Khan Makan fared forth from the palace barefoot, and he walked in a short-sleeved gown, wearing on his head a skull-cap of felt. 7 years old, and carrying a scone 3 days stale, and in the deep glooms of night betook himself to the portal of al-Arish of Baghdad. Here he waited for the gate being opened, and when it was opened, he was the first to pass through it. And he went out at random, and he wandered about the waste nights and days. When the dark hours came, his mother sought him, but found him not. Whereupon the world waxed straight upon her, for all that it was great and wide, and she took no delight in aught of weal it supplied. She looked for him a first day, and a second day, and a third day, till 10 days were past, but no news of him reached her. Then her breast became contracted, and she shrieked and shrilled, saying, "Oh, my son! Oh, my darling, thou hast revived my regrets. Suffice not what I endured, but thou must depart from my home? After thee I care not for food, nor joy in sleep. and not but tears and mourning are left me. O my son, from what land shall I call thee, and what town hath given thee refuge? Then her sobs burst out, and she began repeating these couplets. Well learned we, since you left our grief and sorrow to sustain, while bows of severance shot their shafts in many a railing rain. They left me after girthing on their sails of cordwain, to fight the very pangs of death while spanned they sandy plain. Mysterious, through the nightly gloom there came the moan of dove, a ring-dove, and replied I, cease thy plaint, how durst complain? If by my life her heart, like mine, were full of pain and pine, she had not decked her neck with ring, nor soul with ruddy stain. Field is mine own familiar friend, bequeathing me a store of parting pang and absence ache to suffer evermore. Then she abstained from food and drink, and gave herself to excessive tear-shedding and lamentation. Her grief became public property far and wide, and all the people of the town and the country wept with her and cried, Where is thine eye, O Zau al-Muluk? And they bewailed the rigors of time, saying, Would heaven we knew what hath befallen Kanmakan, that he fled his native town, and chased himself from the place where his father used to fill all an hungry case, and do justice and grace. And his mother redoubled her weeping and wailing, till the news of Kanmakan's departure came to King Sasan. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so do I cease my tale for the day, till it